Hello, Melissa Center. How are you?
I'm well, Jennifer Apple. How are you today?
I'm hanging in. I am definitely hanging in, hanging on, hanging in. I feel obviously they mean different things, but I never know which one to use. I don't know if you ever use any of them, but
Yeah, I was just like, I have to think about that for a second. Hanging on
yeah, it's like the grip,
feels the grip that you're
like
like,
that weird cat meme of like that cat hanging onto that tree that used to be the
yeah,
thing that people would send. Yeah, the hanging on.
yeah. And that feels like I'm gonna fall off.
Yeah,
Hanging in feels like I'm in it. Like I'm like a little in the weeds. I'm in the process, but I'm like,
yeah,
I'm in motion somehow.
yeah. Can you be both? Do you think?
I'm sure you can be one or the other, and at sometimes both.
Yeah, it's usually like the hanging in, hanging on. It feels kind of the same.
Yeah.
But I know they're not. Anyway, for anybody who does not know who you are, who are you today?
Hi, I am Melissa Center. I am both an actor, a storyteller, um, a crowdfunding queen, which we'll get into in
Mhm.
a second, I think. A lot of my work really centers around like the female experience and really bold, visceral women's stories. Um, and I have a very interesting journey that I'm excited to discuss.
I'm so pumped. Let's just dive in. What is tell us the journey. Tell us the origin story. Tell us how we got here.
Cool. Started out as an actor, first and foremost. That was always like in my little heart as a kid growing up
Mhm.
in the Chicago area.
Nice.
Um, Went to Northwestern for theater and musical theater. I'm very like goal oriented, and most of the time in my life, I've always been like, I want to do this thing,
Mhm.
and thankfully, most of that has come to fruition.
That's awesome.
Failures along the way, many,
Of
but
course.
like, um, so yeah, always knew that I wanted to like be a performer and love singing and dancing. And so my foundation was really on stage, but I
Mhm.
also like was a huge couch potato as a kid and like loved movies and movie musicals. And so I had like these two aspects of my dreams really like in my mind. And I grew up in a household that was really um like into cultural education, and like
Mhm.
my parents took me to the theater and music and all of that. Like that was just like a part of the fabric of my upbringing, which is awesome. And Chicago is such a strong arts
Oh yeah.
community that my education was really, really strong. So I had a lot of opportunity to like exercise that, which is
Love
like a
that.
huge blessing. So went to Northwestern, was a theater major, and then was in the musical theater certificate program, which was kind of like a special, almost like a minor. They would audition the theater kids and then the voice majors, and then
Mhm.
portion of those people would be selected for this thing. And then I moved to New York and was auditioning a lot for musical stuff, feeling like I was working, I was getting work here and there, but it's like always such a hustle. Not all
Mhm.
careers, right? Always such a hustle. I felt like in many ways I was banging my head against the wall and trying to get in certain rooms and feeling like I was really being pigeonholed because I'm short, I'm 5'2". I've always looked very young.
Mhm.
Like I have outgoing energy. Um, so I felt like I was being boxed into this like young, plucky, like perky ingenue thing, and it didn't
Yeah.
necessarily like align with my point of view or like
Mhm.
depth of my spirit or my soul. So there was always this disconnect, and I felt a little bit like I don't fit here.
Yeah.
Um, so I was shifting into more like placing energy and focus on that the like quote straight acting part of my craft
Mhm.
or career, and finding more fulfillment in that. And at the time, I had been working on this like solo show with a mentor of mine, Wynn Handman, who unfortunately passed during COVID, but he was like a legend in
Sorry.
the theater world. And it was like a really amazing opportunity. And it was a very serious play, an adaptation of The Giver by Lois Lowry, which is like this dystopian,
Yeah.
novel, dark world. And I had this desire to start getting in for TV and film stuff. And I felt like I was kind of like more known for musical theater stuff. And I was like, I'm a serious actress too, like really wanting to
Yeah.
prove myself. And I came across on Craigslist the misconnection section. I don't
Okay.
remember this.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
How
yeah.
could you forget? That
How
was
can you
a
forget? But like
treasure
it's
trove.
not a thing anymore because our world has changed. But
I
at the
know.
time, in case you don't know, like people would post these anonymous things on misconnections on Craigslist. And it would be like, I saw you on the F train and you had purple hair and these like great sneaks. And if
It
you
was really epic and
it was
beautiful.
epic, beautiful, strange, like
Beyond.
outrageous. And
So
so
strange.
I came across it and I was like, this is a treasure trove. And I had already been doing so much character work with my mentor and like with the solo show that I had like a template and a muscle for it. But this was so quirky and weird that it was like, I have to do something with this. So I just started to pull ones that like I found funny or interesting or strange or just like wanted to try on. And then I decided to film them. So I would like use it as a monologue and I would film it and like put on a different costume or stick it in and, like have the frame be filled with the environment that represented the character and all these things. And my then boyfriend was a gaffer and like cinematographer. So he would shoot it. And it was so fun. And so I started to make like a web series before it was a popular thing to do. And it was like such a good antidote to the like kind of heavy, deep work that I was doing with this
Mhm.
play. So it was like a beautiful like compliment. And then I was borrowing a friend's camera and like kind of piecemealing things together. And I was I felt like I wanted more resources.
Mhm.
And so I decided to launch a Kickstarter campaign. And this was like new. All these
Right.
crowdfunding platforms were like brand new. So I'm like, I'm going to launch a Kickstarter and then I'm going to buy my own camera and I'm going to get pro editing software and like have just certain things so that I could step it up, you know? So I did that and it was like terrifying. I
Yeah.
raised, I think my goal was $8,000, which at the time for me was like so much money.
Uh-huh.
I was like waiting tables um and it was just me. So it was like so nervous to ask people for money for like this like silly project. But
Yeah.
when I get something in my mind that I want to do, like I said with the whole Northwestern thing and just how I function, it's like, you will do this. You will
Yeah.
achieve it. It is happening.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
so I'm very fortunate. I have a lot of people who are very supportive around me to, made sure that I would be successful and in my, asking and stepping outside my comfort zone. Like I ended up raising the $8,000. And then I was able to bring on like a director for one of the episodes and really just like expand the way I was telling stories. So I was also like teaching myself how to filmmake in the process.
Mhm.
I was then invited to be one of the original digital caucus members through the Writers Guild on the East Coast, which was
Okay.
like, oh, how cool. Like, I guess I'm official now.
Yeah.
I thought I was just an actor, and this gave me a lot of strength and empowerment to be like, yes, I am an actor, and to walk into rooms very proudly and also be able to have conversation with producers or people who I thought like quote unquote had power over me.
Mhm.
But now it was like it's such an equalizing factor. And it was exciting. So I got this bug to continue on this journey. And then shortly thereafter, I ended up moving to Los Angeles. And I knew I wanted to do more TV film work. And I also had now this motor inside me to continue to create.
Yeah.
Um, so I would say like a couple years in, I was in this lab context with a bunch of fellow actors, some writer directors. We would just meet on a weekly basis and like work on scenes or whatever it is that we wanted to bring to the table. We were all peers. There was no like hierarchy. We had a
Mhm.
facilitator, Roth, who started it, but it wasn't like he was our teacher. It was more
Yeah,
of a
yeah, yeah.
here we are figuring this stuff out. And I was just inspired by the work that I was witnessing. And I really wanted to create something for us, I always had this love for ensemble movies. Like anniversary party was always one of my
Yeah.
favorites. And I'm like, I want to be like them when I grow up.
Yeah.
And so at some point, a couple of theater projects started bubbling out of this. And I ended up doing a play with one of my colleagues, like in this backyard that was so magical and like invite only. And all these awesome people came out. And I decided I want to make a movie. I want to make a feature film. That is a dream of mine. And with these people in collaboration, organically somehow, micro budget, like this was going to be my first feature. So it didn't seem feasible for me to like get proper investors for something. I was just starting out. So I pitched this idea to a handful of my colleagues. I pitched a couple ideas, actually, one of which was deeply personal. And I think that was the one that they connected to because it felt real.
Yeah, exactly.
And so then one of them said, I'm going to help you write it, because I didn't have confidence in my structure. And he had more experience with that. So we would sit down and he would help me shape the story that I had in my mind and heart, and match it with, our colleagues were going to be specific characters within that. So like build to their strengths. And then it was ready to move forward. So I was like, okay, we got to get some money to do the thing.
Exactly.
And so I thought, here we go again with the crowdfunding. And I like was reluctant, but also gung-ho, because I really had to make this film. Like I had to do it. It was, it was unpacking some personal things that I was dealing with in my life at the time too. And my spirit just like needed to process. And this is how I do it. So I launched an Indiegogo campaign. This time my goal was $20,000, which is $0 for a feature film.
Yeah.
But
Truly.
again, $20,000 for me at the time was like, holy shit, that's a lot of money. And I didn't know what I was doing really. I kind of go by instinct. I was throwing spaghetti at a wall to see what stuck. I thought if I modeled my campaign after similar budget ranges that I see have been successful, like on the platform, model the perks, model whatever, all those elements that I'm seeing. I had an ensemble cast. I'm like, they'll give me shout outs on social media. Click, go, we've launched. I thought that would be enough for me to garner the support. And I was like sorely mistaken.
Okay.
So it was a total slog. I worked my ass off. Poor West, who was my co-writer and then ultimately director, I was like really roping him in. Anytime contributions came in, I'm like, we're doing a video and we're thanking them like one by one. And you're sitting here with me. And he's like, oh God. But that's, the gratitude of it was very important to me. It was painful to source the funds. I didn't have a process. It was stressful. It was draining. I ended up not quite reaching my goal, but in the process ended up connecting with a couple of people who functioned as like angel investors.
Okay.
So ultimately the movie got made.
Great.
Which is wonderful. It exists. I'm proud of it. We premiered at Dances with Films in LA. So
Amazing.
it was like such a dream come true and so exciting and beautiful.
Yeah.
However, I was like, never want to do that again.
Yeah. And now here you are as like a self-proclaimed crowdsourcing queen.
Yeah.
So that's where I want to like connect these dots, because clearly there was like a no thank you.
Yeah. So there was a big no thank you. But then flash forward, I had another project. And I was like, this has to get made. And this is a project, a solo show that I wrote called Marrying Jake Gyllenhaal, which is a whole other story to unpack. I had made a plan to premiere this at Edinburgh Fringe in 2020. Obviously, that had to change because
clearly
of 2020.
That was derailed.
But prior to the world shutting down, I had put certain elements in place. And one of those elements was actually I had hired someone to help me with the crowdfunding process, who I had met out at the Film Independent. His name is Justin Giddings, the Kickstarter guy.
Yeah.
And because I knew, I was like, I know I don't have a cast to rely on. It's just me. Like, I can't fail. I need help. The other way was not a way. I need a process. I need a system, and like accountability, support, like take my credit card. I trusted, no, seriously, I was like, here's my credit card. Like I trusted that I was going to raise the money and be able to pay it,
Wow.
because I had to.
Yeah.
Um, and that was the pivotal decision for me. And then moment in so many ways, because I then learned process, implemented it. I'm a good student. So I'm like, check.
Yeah.
Um, Ended up raising, I knew in week 1 of my campaign that I was going to be fully funded, which was insane to me,
Wow.
because then I could focus on rehearsal. And like,
Yeah.
what happened is I ended up raising for a live streamed production of the show because of COVID. We filmed it with 3 cameras, but it was all like in the moment, switching. So
Yeah.
it felt like real live theater. And it was an expensive undertaking. So I knew in week 1 I would be fully funded. So that was a huge relief. I ended up raising over $30,000 for the project.
Amazing.
And I was like, I get it now. And then because of how this process really like makes you show up in a different way, so consistently and boldly, and the energy behind it, then people were like, that was amazing. Can you help me? Like I've seen all these crowdfunding campaigns before, or people have so many, there's just like a lot of stigma with like
100%.
crowdfunding. And
Mm-hmm.
so they're like, how did you do that?
Yeah.
And so then it was a very organic next step for me to start taking clients.
Okay.
Yeah.
Love this. Thank you for sharing that. I love the humility and like I couldn't figure this out.
Yeah.
And therefore I had to take the steps for myself to make sure I knew how to figure it out,
Yeah.
own it, and then implement it, see the success in it, and then feel like I am now able to give back in the way that like somebody else had given to me. I love
Yeah.
that full circle moment for sure. Let's break it down then if you're game to do it.
Yeah.
What is the difference, or what are the perks and the differences between, say, like the Seed and Sparks, the Indiegogos, the Kickstarters, why you would do one of those rather than just like, reaching out to somebody's CEO at their, Fortune 500 company and hoping for the best?
Cool. So depending on what you're trying to make, if you're making a film that's $1 million budget, like you're
Mhm.
not going to crowdfund that,
Right.
because statistically, and this is part of conversations that I have, I mean, in theory, you could crowdfund that, but you have to have a very special set of circumstances to like make that happen.
Could you crowdfund parts of it?
Yes, you could definitely crowdfund parts of it.
Yeah.
Anytime I'm having a conversation with like a potential client, I think most people just see the optics of it, like, which is what I saw with the Indiegogo thing. I'm like, oh, if I just do this and have like
Mhm.
the pitch video and the right perks and whatever, like, but it's so much behind the scenes. It's
Right.
so much behind the scenes. It's so much organization. It's so much contact prep. It's so much planting seeds and having a process of communication over time consistently, knowing how to message yourself, knowing how to make the ask, how often. People are inundated with social media, and half the people you post stuff and only a small fraction of your audience is even going to see it at any given
Yeah.
time. So you're thinking like, oh, I'm bothering people with my messaging, but like 3 people have seen it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it really requires like a lot of showing up and a lot of direct asks. I mean, I'll give a little anecdote. Even I'm on the board of the Festival of Cinema New York City, and part of my responsibility as a board member was to raise a small portion of funds. And
Mhm.
so even like recently I was doing some outreach, and it was interesting because I was like, a couple of my like colleagues, I had to ask a few times, and not take it personal when either they couldn't respond or didn't or whatever. It took them a couple of times,
Yeah.
because one, for example, like she has a new job. She was like traveling to 3 different places and one out of the country, and used
Yeah.
to work for the UN, and this thing was happening and this thing was happening. And it's just like, sure, I'll get to that, but everyone has stuff going on. So,
Mhm.
I think if had I not had the experience of like going through this or working with clients, I might be like, oh, I'm bothering her. And like, she
Mhm.
doesn't really want to give, or, like I feel small, or, people shrink in the face of
Mhm.
the ask. But really, it's just our lives are busy. And so
Mhm.
sometimes you just need to nudge people a little bit and they're over the moon to support you. It's just a matter of timing.
Yeah.
So it's like a little tangent. Um, in terms of I have $1 million budget and help me find the money. Um, and I think this also pertains to the idea of having a marketing plan in place, because that's really the work that you need to do for a crowdfund. Any audience that you blast out to, only a portion of those people will even like register it and click on your link to visit your page.
Yeah.
And then only a portion of those people will actually contribute. And in the crowdfunding space, the average contribution is going to be about $50, right?
Mhm.
When you like from the smallest to the highest, that's typically a backer average. So if you're looking for $1 million, how many people times 50 have to yield $1
Right.
million, right?
Yeah.
And that's not even the amount of people that you would need to capture.
Mhm.
So it becomes statistically quite challenging. And in storytelling world, it's not like you can run ads and target random people and have them contribute to your crowdfunding campaign. Like
Okay.
storytelling campaigns typically require an added layer of trust and community connectivity. So
Mhm.
typically the work is way more grassroots and way more like relationship driven.
Mhm.
There are outliers. There are campaigns that have raised like a couple $100,000, but typically that does require some sort of like known entity, either a celebrity who is involved in that process
Right.
or like an existing, like very robust subscriber base that has already like given money for things. Those
Mhm.
are fewer and far between.
Yeah.
So
So you're finding that like the cap for, say, a crowdfund ask would be what? Like the cap. I
yeah,
guess
I
you would
mean,
have to know your sphere of how many
you
people
really
you're gonna
have,
multiply
yeah,
those
you really
stats.
have to, it's a little bit case to case basis. Like, depends on your mailing list and the strength
Mhm.
of that community. But usually I'd say the easiest thing to crowdfund would be anything from like $20,000 to $60,000.
Okay.
And when
Great.
you start to go across that threshold, it's not impossible, but you need a more robust support system.
Yeah.
And then when you get to that six-figure mark, that's when it gets pretty tricky. I
Yeah.
think in Kickstarter, the stats are like less than 0.1% are successful for
Jeez.
films, right?
Yeah.
For those kinds of numbers. And then again, it's because to yield that $100,000, you need like 1 million eyeball reach.
Exactly. So let's gear then this conversation towards like the 20 to 60, assuming that
Yeah.
we have the network of people, the numbers to potentially make this work. Why would I use why would I use a
Together.
Kickstarter? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So each have their pros and cons.
Mhm.
Indiegogo, the model is more whatever you raise, you receive,
Mhm.
which can be good on one hand and can be very challenging on another. In that it's easier, it kind of depends on your constitution. It's easier for you to, as a filmmaker, to let yourself a little off the hook if you get like 3/4 of your way to your goal.
Yeah.
That final push can be like, well, I raised this amount of money, like, we'll just work with that.
Mhm.
So it's easier for you to like not really finish.
Okay.
And it can be a little challenging from a backer perspective if you don't start strong, if you don't have certain things in place where you have a really strong launch, then it's not so credible. Let's say you're 30% funded and you have a week to go.
Right.
The person coming in is like, well, they can't make a feature film with $5,000. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So am I going to really support them?
Right.
So that can be tricky. There are other ways in which Indiegogo is wonderful, and they have um, other support in place for you. But that's just a factor of some of this is just like knowing who you are, right?
Mhm.
Do I know myself that I'm going to finish no matter what? Or do I tend to go a little soft on myself, right? So that's just like
Okay.
one thing to keep in mind. Oh, the other thing with Indiegogo, they have projects of all sorts of different, it used to be more story to like indie film, and now they have lots of like, tech or product or
Products, yeah.
different innovation. And actually, I think the strength of their client base or whatever is now a little bit more in that space.
Okay.
So that has shifted. Seed and Spark, purely dedicated towards filmmakers, storytellers. Their model is you have to reach 80% of your fundraising goal to keep your money. Then you're considered greenlit. So you keep whatever it is you've raised. But, obviously the goal is to reach 100%. So that can be more incentivizing because it's like, okay, there's some pressure involved here. We need to get to at least 80%. And it helps the audience to be like, let's help them get there, right?
Yeah.
And then I guess maybe similarly to the Indiegogo idea, like you have to make sure that you finish. I know Seed and Spark now, a cool thing that's new is they have like a cohort of people that are looking through existing campaigns. And if it lines up with their value system, they have some people who are putting in almost like grants, right? Like $1,000 contribution, or they get special contributions like that. So that's really cool. Seed and Spark has very robust education for filmmakers, and they're pretty like social conscious, which is nice. So I find like if you're a female filmmaker, if you fall in the LGBTQ spectrum, if you're a BIPOC filmmaker, the ethos of Seed and Spark is very like nurturing of all of that.
Yeah.
Specifically.
Yeah.
Where the other two platforms are just like kind of democratic.
And then Kickstarter, I think, is
Kickstarter.
Right?
Kickstarter is like the most famous platform, most, like globally known. Kickstarter, you have to reach 100% of your goal to keep your funds. So some people that's like, my nervous system can't handle it. I will freeze, and like, I cannot, like that. Hell no. Right. But it can be very energizing and motivating for yourself and for the audience, because it's like, they have to reach their goal. Right. So you can really rally people towards that. And it ends up being really an asset.
Yeah. When you work with a client and they're deciding what crowdsourcing space to use, is it obviously there's like that, the impetus of like, I need to make the thing, my nervous system can only handle the X, Y, and Z. But what else are the contributing factors? Is it like, okay, I need to prepare on the back end for, a Indiegogo for like a social media thank you, and therefore like all these extra pieces are not in our budget, or we don't have the time frame to do that? Or is it like why would I pick one over the other besides just the external clock of 80% or 100%?
So the external clock is a big deciding factor. Another factor is platform fees. Okay. So Seed and Spark, so mostly in the past, they all charge the 5% platform fee plus a credit card processing fee, which ends up being about 3%. In the past year, Seed and Spark decided to offset that 5% platform fee. So if someone comes in as a backer, they can add a tip essentially to their contribution, and whatever tips ends up being collected collectively. And that goes towards their platform fees for all of the filmmakers.
Got it.
So the filmmaker isn't having to pay that out. Instead, it gets offset. So that is a factor of some people's bottom lines, as you're thinking about what do I really need? And that can be a determining factor. In terms of how much money are you raising, Seed and Spark has tended to favor slightly smaller raises. They have a really high success rate because I think they most of their raises are like historically under $40,000.
Okay.
And even when you're getting to the like 30, 40K mark, you have to submit a plan of action of like, this is, my audience. you have to get approval from them in a deeper way. The other platforms, you can kind of put up a thing and get approved unless you have something in your campaign that's like illegal or like, you know, very inappropriate somehow.
Yeah.
Seed & Spark has an extra level of, you have to submit the page, they go through it, they say, think about this, then you have to resubmit it, and then it's okay. It's good to go. And if you don't have enough of an audience, they're gonna say like, we recommend you lower your goal amount.
Wow. Okay. Are there others like sites that I haven't mentioned that aren't these three that people also use?
Some people have used a platform like GoFundMe for film. I typically don't love that idea because I feel GoFundMe is better suited for like actual charities.
Yeah, exactly.
And a thing that is one mental shift that I like to impart with my clients is like, you're not a charity, right? You're not actually asking for donations either. Like, this is a contribution. They're receiving something in return of value for what you're putting together. So I don't love that association. And also the platform itself hasn't always been as conducive for like storytelling like the others.
Yeah.
I think they recently allow you to put a video, but they used to not. And you have to have a video if you're making a film.
Yeah. Well, that was my next question, which is like, before I decide, let's say, let's, for the sake of this, we'll create an example for the sake of this conversation, right? So let's say I'm trying to raise $30,000 for a short film. And I decide I'm weighing my different options for my different platforms. I've decided to, I look at my budget and I realize, okay, this one is the one that works best for me. What else am I doing preemptively before I begin the actual crowdfunding itself?
Yeah. All the work, the crowdfunding,
right, exactly.
The actual ask is like, okay, I've prepared. And most people, they'll reach out to me. They're like, I'm trying to launch like next week or next month even. And I'm like, how much are you trying to raise? $30,000. Like, I'm sorry, but good luck with that.
Right.
So usually 90 days of prep is really what you need before a launch. And when you launch, it's a 30-day raise.
Okay. So your whole time frame is like an 120-day experience. In these 90 days, why do I need 90 as opposed to 60 or 30? Like, what am I filling my time with?
You're filling your time with, so we can work backwards. Like the page itself takes time to build, right?
Yeah.
Not so much time ultimately, but time. The pitch video is very important, right? You want to make sure that the visual representation of what you're asking for is on the same level of like your potential to create, because it's a trust building as well. So the actual production of your pitch video, just like you want to think, what do I need to shoot that and edit that? So I would say 1 month putting all of the elements of your page together, right?
And that would also include any of the gifts that people are giving if you decide to use a platform that has those gifts in place of like, you donated X amount of money and I need to do this, like prepping those things also.
Yeah, you want to make those decisions, certainly, of the perks that you're going to be offering. The delivery of those things wouldn't occur until you are either like in well on your way. So you don't have to get too worried about like having the actual items in place. And in fact, the less amount of physical goods you can promise, the better, because you want the money to go into the film, not like some t-shirt that no one gives a fuck about. Excuse my friend.
No, it's true.
But,
yeah, we all know.
Unless you have a whole branding plan for the ultimate marketing, and that's going to be something really important for how you get the word out for your film. But like usually, resources are better spent on the actual production. So there are creative ways to tell a story through perks that I love to do when I'm working with a client, of like, how can we get really creative and get the audience involved, and have them receive something meaningful that also connects them back to story and gets them excited.
Are there a couple examples that you have found that you don't mind sharing that you have found to be successful, like perk wise, that aren't tangible t-shirts or tote bags?
I mean, I'll share a couple that I did for my story.
Great.
my show has some original music in it, and there are some raps, okay,
Okay.
which is hilarious because look at me.
Yeah.
But it's also like part of the humor of the thing. Like
Mhm.
I poke fun at myself. But for one of the perks, I ended up like composing original raps for the person at that
Okay.
level, which was like again so absurd and ridiculous, but it's just like fun and people
Yeah.
like that, right? Or another tier, I inside my story, I actually like write a love letter to Jake Gyllenhaal, and
Mhm.
so and
As one
so
does in the privacy of their own home, of course, yeah.
and it's a way longer story that you'll understand in a later time. But so I did custom love letters to people, or
Yeah.
either for them or on behalf of them to someone else.
Okay.
And so that was like personal and cool for them, and it also just connected them to the theme of what it was that I was doing, and people really appreciated it.
Yeah.
So um, I think the biggest takeaway from that concept is crowdfunding is community building and
Yeah.
audience building, and I think we forget as storytellers that the people that are engaging with our quote unquote project,
Mhm.
it's actually like human beings.
Exactly.
It's not a transactional thing. I think that we're programmed into this transactional life lately, you know, and how do we remember that living, breathing humans are the people that are engaging with our content?
Completely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, yeah,
how do
yeah.
we deepen that connection they have to us and the story that we're
Yeah.
building?
I love the idea that the perks, I think when I think about these perks, it's always like, okay, they have to be really impactful, and they have to really, get bigger as the gifts get bigger. And it's like, well, we can reframe what bigger means. We can
Yeah,
reframe that it means more personal. We can reframe that it means more specific. It doesn't
yeah,
necessarily, again, mean more financially extravagant or
totally.
physically large. It could be something that is
Exactly.
directly in relationship to what we're doing. Love
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Okay, so you're creating the video that looks in alignment with the product that you're hoping to create. You are getting the website all sorted and settled. What
Yeah,
else are we doing?
great. So that's like 15% of the work that you're actually doing
Cool.
in
Cool, cool,
preparation.
cool.
So you're going to be planting seeds on social, right? So that you're priming your algorithm in addition to
Mhm.
your audience, and building that out over time so that when you hit launch, you actually have a crowd that is going to see the content that you're putting
Right.
out. And the act of asking throughout the duration of the campaign, the social media is the proof that things are up and running. And then the actual direct ask, whether that is via your emails or via a phone call or via, DMs or whatever, is the thing that's going to get you the money, right?
Okay. Mhm.
But the likelihood that someone's going to contribute in a excited way and in a generous way, I think increases when that visibility is matched, right? So
Okay.
it's a real intersection with like the social world and like the plan to like direct outreach.
Got it. So you have in your brain, okay, we are starting to prep 90 days. This is the date that we're aiming to launch the
Yeah.
site. So obviously the site and everything has to be ready by then for sure.
Yeah.
But leading up to that, we'll have been on Canva or wherever else we create our content and our reels and whatever, we'll start to selectively put those things into the algorithm so that come a period of time when we are doing the actual direct asks prior to the launching of the site
Mhm.
itself,
Mhm.
these things are already up and running. So that's also now I would imagine another 20% of the work that you're doing is like the
Mhm.
creation of the marketing social content.
Mhm. And
Okay.
and the, like, filling in whatever hub you are using on social with people too, right? It's like you need to corral them into a space.
Okay.
So that takes just time to build.
Yeah.
And the
You're like
other
saying
thing
like creating like a handle or whatever and like getting followers and all that.
exactly.
Got it. Okay.
The other thing keep in mind is depending on the platform you're engaging with, like Facebook, for example, if you go from zero to messaging someone all of a sudden or messaging, 50 people in a day, they're going to shut
Mhm.
you down,
Yeah.
right? So you need to develop a practice of that leading up to a launch so that you're able to,
Yeah.
so that it doesn't think that you're some bot or whatever.
Okay. I
So
know.
that's another part of the process. And then
Okay.
you're organizing contacts in a specific way and preparing communications for those contacts, because the first few days of a campaign sets the whole pace for the rest. And so you want to have a very organized launch to ensure you ultimately reach your goal, and just to make it easier, right? Like,
Mhm.
I had an experience of day one raising 50% of my goal
Wow.
in one day. And I was
Wow.
like, oh, damn. Okay, cool. Like, that felt better
Yeah.
than like eking along and driving an anvil up a mountain,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, to that point, depending on how much money you want to raise, you are not personally going to be doing all of this by yourself, nor
Okay.
can you, nor should you. So, some of the process is also expanding your team. You need people who are also doing this work. And that doesn't mean just like, yeah, I'll repost your social post a couple times through the campaign. It means you need a couple people also preparing contacts and preparing communications and doing the daily tasks of the crowdfunding campaign in order to source the amount of money that you need.
Mm-hmm.
And on average, for every 5K you want to raise, that would be a person's yield.
Okay.
Some people have more robust, networks, or, your situation, but usually a part of the prep process is like, okay, cool. I know I need to raise $30,000, to use your example,
Mm-hmm.
Jennifer. Um, that means, again, depending on how strong your list is, that you'd need, you want to do this with 5 or 6 people total.
So I would, in these 90 days, also reach out to my friends or family or connections, being like, hey, I really value you because X, Y, and Z reasons. Here's a little love note. How would you feel about helping me in raising this by reaching out to your network? That kind of ask.
Yeah.
Or would I have done these reaches prior to these even 90 days?
Within month 1
Yeah, that
of
would
the
be
prep
part of the ask.
period, one of the tasks is to understand how much do I need and what kind of a team would I need around me to achieve that.
Okay. Do you have a particular method that you have found successful in asking people to be these kinds of ambassadors? Or do you just have to like know your relationships and know who you can ask? Because I feel like people surprise you sometimes. I think that's part of it, right? Like, you know,
And that's exactly what I was going to say, because it's the same process of asking for funds, in that
yeah,
you actually don't know who's
correct.
going to surprise you, who's going to say yes, who's going to say yes generously, and who's going to just not be able to
Correct.
in this moment of time. And it doesn't mean anything about you. It's
Mhm.
just, for whatever reason, like, this isn't the right fit for this
Yeah.
particular situation. So, some of the work, and I think a big part of now what I'm doing with clients from the get, is to really get clear on like vision,
Mhm.
um and like, why this project, why do you want to put all this work into this thing, like, why does this project matter, what deeply, like,
Mhm.
sometimes people are like, oh, I I'm frustrated with my career. I mean, this was me too, right? Like, I'm frustrated
Mhm.
with my career. I want a calling card for myself, right?
Mhm.
I need to do this. Okay, so there are deeper things underneath there that I help to locate, so
Yeah.
you know in your bones, right? And also, you've selected this particular project to do that.
Right.
So why this? You could have selected XYZ other stories. There's
100%.
something there for you. So how do we get super clear on what that is? And when you're really clear and in alignment with that, that's the like gold from which
Yeah.
everything will spring, right? Because you're going to attract people to say yes to you, and to say yes to joining your team, because of the strength of the passion of the need behind that. And
Mhm.
you're going to attract contributors, and in a generous way, because as you're communicating, via the story of the thing, via the pitch video, via the energy behind your ask,
Mhm.
That will be felt, and your audience will then in turn reciprocate with either money or
Energy.
connect the dots,
Yeah.
like
Mhm.
helping amplify.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that as like the ultimate thing because you said it so beautifully too of like there are many projects that we could all be doing. Like I think
Yeah,
about in my brain how many I am an ideas gal. That is who
yeah,
I am. I have thousands of ideas for
yeah.
anything. You give me a prompt and I can run for days. Like that is my superpower.
Mhm,
But ultimately, not everything can be made. And ultimately, also, not everything can be made simultaneously. So
mhm,
something has to take priority. And if you are choosing to do this one project and you are engaging deeply with your time and energy and resources, and also asking of people in your sphere for their time, energy, and resources, like knowing that and really getting in touch with the feeling around that, I think ultimately is the thing that serves you the most, because then when it starts to get really hard and the numbers don't start to add up or you get really frustrated or you hit a roadblock, then you come back to like no, like what is the reason I'm actually doing this? Not
mhm,
because I want somebody to know who I am. It's like, okay,
mhm,
what about this story speaks to my heart or this moment in time or my community, and getting
mhm.
back in touch with that to reinvigorate you every single time it starts to feel really hard, which I think it
Absolutely.
probably will.
Yep.
So I love that as like the guiding posture through doing all of this. Is there
Mhm.
any other like thing that I didn't ask about the 90-day ramp up tactically that like people need to be doing in that period besides the website, the materials, the prepping, the reach outs to the humans who might be in alignment to be part of your team, the social media build to favor the algorithm, any of that? Is there anything else missing in there?
That's the core stuff, just like practically
Yeah.
speaking. And then I would say, just to add additional value to the other piece, the internal workings,
Mm-hmm.
that um, you're going to be the most successful if in that time you're really, really doing the inner work necessary to show up fully.
Yeah.
Because the process too is a big mirror to like all of your
Insecurities.
insecurities. It really
Yeah.
is. And
Yeah.
it's totally normal and everyone feels it. Even, I mean, I've been doing this for a long time now, and even I was, um, procrastinating a little bit for the other like very small raise I needed to do for the organization, you know.
Mhm. Yeah.
So it's human.
Mhm.
But the more you can, and some people don't necessarily know how to do this, right? Which is also where someone like me comes in to help guide you along that. But really, like the clearing and the coming back and the getting in tune and the envisioning, um, I think some people underestimate the power that has.
Mhm.
Um, and one or the other, like you have to do all of it in
Mhm.
conjunction.
Yeah. Yeah. What else is like if I didn't ask this, this conversation about crowdsourcing would be pointless. Like what else is something that people need to know?
Some people will come to me and be like, okay, cool. So I want to do this thing. And like, will you do it for me?
Mm. Mhm.
Or like, I can just like kind of hire someone to do it for me. Right.
Mhm.
Um, and so the answer is no. It's like missing the point.
Yeah.
Well, because again, you're gonna be at the forefront of your own project. Like people are
Mhm.
saying yes because not because the idea is so cool, you
Mhm.
know, it's in support of you. It's to be
Right.
your patron. It's because they believe in you and your vision, and that requires a level of trust that you have with your direct audience.
Mhm.
And so I think, yeah, it's easy to be like, cool, I have this thing and I'm going to like hire this person to do all the prep or all the work and like, check, check, check.
Yeah.
But then you are missing the point. Um, and that shows me that there's a lot more inner work there that needs to be done. You need to come fully to the table.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Well, I think what we're
the
getting
people.
at is the doing of the crowdsourcing is a single method to the way in which one can get money. Like, this is a choice to operate in this way. And if you're
Yeah.
going to choose to engage in this kind of
That's right.
fundraising, then you need to actually own the fact that, like, you are the thing.
Yeah,
And
totally.
you are funding from many, many people, your community, who
Yeah.
believe in you.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that you can't do that from individual donors simultaneously or go in an alternative route to find it. But if one is to engage in a crowdsourcing medium,
Yeah.
that the internal work of believing one's own worth, believing in one's project really deeply, getting to the root of all of that, because it ultimately comes down to many people also believing in it, because that
Yeah.
is what crowdsourcing is.
Yeah.
That is the thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
From my
Kids,
experience, and
yeah.
I don't know, there might be some people out there who like hire some shit out and do, I don't know, but that's not the type of work that I engage with or see
Yeah.
or am privy to.
Yeah.
Um, so
No, but I think that's exactly why we have you in the space. Obviously there's so much more to unpack here, and that's why people can go and, work with you to, like, really get to know the nitty-gritty around it. I think for
yeah,
me to even just, like, scratch the surface for people who are thinking of using these kind of platforms, and perhaps the ways that they can use them better or more successfully, if they are to use them again, or why one versus the other, like, just even beginning to scratch the surface for me, bringing you on to talk about that is to get to the bottom line of, like, this is ultimately about community and
yeah,
ultimately about relationships and
yeah,
ultimately about looking inwards, although it might be hard and frustrating and difficult and harder at different points than others. Looking inwards and being like, okay, this is why this has to happen now and through me, and learning to lean into being uncomfortable with, being seen for you, which is hard,
totally,
you
totally.
know?
Yes, yes, yes. And like such valuable experience. Like when you were saying, I was just reflecting on one of my last clients. I helped a group of women raise $55,700
Yes.
for a workshop of a new musical called Truth. And Josie, one of my past clients, was like going through this experience. She was a like a co-producer. She's raised for Broadway stuff, but like in a
Mhm.
different capacity, right?
Yeah.
In the more investment based capacity. And she's like, going through this transformed my relationship with money.
Mm.
And in my own coaching practice, she's like, I know now it's out there. Like the money is out there for
Yeah.
me. Right. And she's like, I have a profoundly different relationship to that
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. 100%. The money exists. I think
Yeah.
we've been taught and told, especially as artists, that, the scarcity mindset and the staying small, that it doesn't exist and we need to not take up that space or demand or ask for
Mhm.
what we need. But if you look at any other corporate American industry, like, the money exists. It's
Yeah.
just a matter of how do we access it in a way that we, as storytellers and humans, are able to feel comfortable with, and also, like, recognize that the superpower that we have is the accessing of ourselves in a really true, honest, vulnerable way, and then
Mhm.
showing up from that place in order to do it. And if it's necessary, then doing so through a crowdsourcing medium. But
Yeah.
that has been a really big learning. I know for myself, it's popped up so many times in different episodes that we have had, just about, like, money being, really trying to reframe what it is to have access to that, and
Mhm.
know that it exists, and to take it not from a personal perspective anymore. It's like, it's a thing. It's not personal.
Right.
I mean,
So,
again, it's easier said than done, and
of
I'm not great at
course.
it, but
Yeah,
um,
but especially like just to reflect back what you said, like especially as artists, especially as women,
yeah.
right? Like it just there's another layer there that we've been conditioned into, and
Hmm.
it's extra tender. It's
Yeah.
it's tender to ask for help, period. And then
100%.
you add money on top of that, and then you add money for my art on top of that when we're
Hmm.
taught like that what we do is frivolous or
Hmm.
whatever. So, and none of that's true. That's all bullshit and lies.
Uh-huh.
But then to really like, you know, untangle that and then step into your own power and authenticity and like whatever magic that you have.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, it's a process.
Yeah. So for anybody who's thinking of doing it, what would you say is the first thing that right after this podcast they could do for themselves?
I would say ask yourself, do I have to tell this story?
Mhm.
And I got like a little chills when I thought of that. And if it is like, yes, then that's enough.
Yeah.
That's all you need,
Yeah.
you know? It's as long as someone is in alignment with like that desire and need and clarity, then you have everything that you need to be successful.
I love that. I love
Yeah.
that. Well, if anybody wants to hire you to also, after they had this realization, to then put it to to put it into fruition and make it a reality, what within some of your boundaries are the best ways for people to reach out, to get in contact with you, to work with you, all of that?
Yeah. So you can follow my antics on social media. Firstly, uh, and on Instagram, I'm at Melissa Center. Melissacenter. I've been favoring Instagram lately. I don't know, but I'm also on like Facebook and Twitter periodically and Threads. But Threads is so weird. I don't know what's going on with
Yeah.
Threads. You know, so like, I guess mainly Instagram. You may email me at Melissa at crowdfundingforcreatives spelled out.com. That's my like crowdfunding specific personal email.
Mhm.
And totally for all of your listeners, way more than happy to set up a complimentary initial consult
Love that. Love
to
that.
discuss projects
Yeah.
and see if, where you're at, time frame, and what you might be a fit for in terms of how I offer my services.
Mhm.
And I guess on that front, I have this kind of cool initiative that is targeted for women. And my goal is to help, at least in this first chunk of it,
Yeah.
of the initiative, help 50 women raise 50K for their
Each?
stories.
Each, you
Yeah.
mean? Okay.
Yeah. So it's like 50 women, 50K. And that's just, for me at least, like an easy, not an easy, but like easy for people to grasp,
Mhm.
right? Um, and yeah, so that's like a kind of a niche service that I am offering to the first 50 women who show up and want to raise 50K. And we can talk about what that looks like. Because there's something about asking for that sum of money that requires us to like really step into our full yes to ourselves and our full expansion
Yeah.
and our full capacity to surround ourselves with community
Yeah.
that I think there's something like witchy and womanly in that I'm like,
Yeah.
like trying to tap into and encourage.
Love it.
So yeah, that's like a slice of what I'm offering, but a new initiative.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being in the space and for sharing these little tidbits to start us all out on stepping into ourselves and our stories and our purposes and our visions and beginning to lean further into the asks that are hard and of the resources that are available. We just need to believe that we can find them. So thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.